Welcome to Pods and Pies. Our pretend fake sponsor is
The Pie Pizzeria.
Are
the
you?
Pie Pizzeria?
I love it.
Are you a vegetarian?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. I just had to make. You said no meats. I just didn't know if it was like, hey, I'm not.
Actually, I'm mostly whole foods plant based, so I don't know. But I do this once a week. I have pizza with the kids, so I don't get too caught up. So
is
yeah, I don't do
this
any
going to
meat.
take away from?
Oh, that's so nice.
Pizza with your kids this week?
This
No,
is good.
are you
hey,
kidding?
double pizza.
Okay.
I mean, I'll double down this week. How about
double down.
that?
We
This
went
is
margarita. I
great.
went half tomato. I wasn't sure.
No, it's great.
Okay.
It's amazing.
Awesome. Dig in.
Really?
Grab.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the tough thing too is it's just you talk a lot. The guests most talk most of the time, and we sit there and eat a lot of the pizza because we ask questions and we hear you. We want to listen
So
to
do
you.
I
We want to
get to
know
eat-
about you.
do I get
Eat
a
as much as
slice?
you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah,
you
you
just
wanna
take a bite. Just dive
Raise
in.
that up just a little bit, just to make sure we can. I want to hear you chew.
Really?
No.
Yeah. This looks good, man.
Mm-hmm.
This just got.
So not.
So
not,
what's half of this is what?
Well, it's all a margarita, but I just added some tomatoes on.
And I'm gonna
half,
take
just
one of
to-
those tomato ones too, man.
So not vegan.
Whole foods plant based is
Whole Foods-
vegan. It's vegan without processed foods.
Okay.
So it's
That's even a
it's
little. Yeah, that's.
about as healthy as. And I'm telling you,
Dude,
so
how
I was
difficult is
keto
that?
for 2 years.
Yeah.
That's a turnaround right there.
It's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what. So the keto, it got me thin, but my cholesterol and it was not good for the body.
Yeah.
Whole foods plant based. My cholesterol is great. I don't have any medication, and I feel great.
Do you
So-
follow? Because the store Whole Foods, right, has a book, Whole Foods Plant-Based Diet. Do you follow that?
I just if it's one ingredient, I eat it.
You got it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so I've eaten more salads in the last 7 months that I've really been living that way than I have my entire life combined. And now I find myself going, oh my gosh, I love these salads, and so a lot of chickpeas, a lot of beans,
Yeah.
no oils. So like I said, other
Coconut?
than pizza and I do if it's raw coconut. So the whole idea behind Whole Foods plant based is you're eating vegan but without any of the processed foods, processed oils. So I'm getting all my fat from avocados, nuts, but not olive oil, which is a lot of vegans will do olive oil. But the whole idea is just to be as natural as possible.
Right.
That's awesome.
I'm going to move that just a little bit.
Yeah,
Sorry.
right there.
Well, we got to introduce our guest.
Oh yeah, James Hadlock. Sorry.
Right on.
That's right on,
Thanks
man.
for being here. I just assume like everybody knows who it is. Everybody knows who's here. Freaking James Hadlock is in the building, man. Everybody knows. They're gonna take one look at him and like, yeah, I know this guy. So, what enticed you? What moved you to do? Was it just the cholesterol?
Just health in general. I mean, I'm 51. I've got 9 kids. I've got 3 grandkids and another one on the way. And I'm thinking about my next 50 years. I really am. I mean, I'm thinking about how am I going to maintain, I always joke and I use the word vitality a lot at home. I'm like, vitality. So it was about just taking better care of myself. Keto was totally a reaction of going, man, I'm out of shape. I don't feel good. I feel sluggish. It was totally a reaction to that. It wasn't really it didn't come from a place of proactive. It came from a place of reactive, where this came from a place of what is going to give me the best chance for my body to do, be at its optimum. And it so far, I mean, it's
Total game changer for you.
totally a game changer. So it's not a moral thing, even though I can see that. But I'll tell you, I watched have you heard of Game Changer on Netflix?
Yes, absolutely.
So if you haven't seen that yet on living a whole foods plant-based, it's compelling. I mean, it really got my wheels turning, and I watched that about a year ago. And
And that was the the maker of that was was that the MMA fighter,
Yeah.
former MMA fighter.
I think he was a part of it, right? And
Yes.
it goes through an
he was
game
from
change-
Australia.
Yeah, I think
so.
so.
Okay. Anyway, I remember that.
And it really showcases athletes that are all whole foods, plant-based, or vegan. And I mean, it was showing, I think it was the Tennessee Titans. They show a bunch of the players, and they're just showing there's this huge myth that you have to get your protein because I grew up in the gym too. I mean, I was a junkie. I was in the gym all the time, and it was all protein. And and when on keto, just throw me another steak, please.
Yeah. Give me some steak, some cheese, and some butter.
Right? Steaks, cheese, and butter. And I did that. And I loved it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the best. And I got results. And then I didn't. And then after about a year and a half, it actually started to work against me. Yeah. I think I did some harm and, just body-wise, because that's not the way our bodies are built to function.
Yeah, I thought you've seen that, Danny. It was a
Game Changer one?
Yeah, you saw that, right?
I don't know if I've seen that.
It was, like you say, it was Netflix, and then actually what
Maybe I
grabbed my attention was that Joe Rogan actually had on an individual that was trying to debunk a lot of that on the Joe Rogan podcast. What was interesting, it was super compelling, some of the stuff that, and this was actually a scientist that talked. I mean, he was very pro, like, vegan diets and healthy diets and whole food diets, but he kind of debunked it. But then he brought on the guy that made the show, and then the guy that made the show disproved all of this critics' information and what he was trying to do and to debunk it. Anyway, it was actually kind of a big deal. I don't know, at least I remember kind of not like headline news, but it was a great movie though, great show.
Well put together. Yeah. It's not in your face. It's very, it brings a lot of science behind it, but also a lot of experiential from, firsthand knowledge from people. So, but here's the thing too, is I've been black and white most of my life. So even when I was on keto, it was like, I'm doing this, I'm not deviating.
Yeah.
And when I started this, I'm like, you know what? It's fun. It's a social thing when we have a pizza night once a week with the kiddos. And I wasn't going to miss out on that. And I'm like, come on, I'm not going to be so black and white the way I used to be. And it works for me,
That's awesome.
Does this mess you up at all? Like,
no, totally not.
Do you do any meat? Like
zero?
Just zero meat. Mm-hmm. Okay. Because I've seen a lot of people do like the whole food, plant-based, but they'll have 5-10 calories maybe from the percent of their calories in a meat.
So there was a piece of pepperoni on my pizza a couple of weeks ago, and it tasted foul and rotten and disgusting to me. Which I think just because I think we acquire, like with anything.
Yeah,
I think once you start doing it, you start craving it more, and it just becomes that lifestyle, right?
Right.
Awesome.
Tough to find things in restaurants. I mean, is it just kind of like you go in a restaurant, you're like, oh, there's so many things on the menu that I used to eat, I'd love. And it's like, oh my gosh. But I'm limited to like 3 things.
But with COVID, I haven't gone out. And so this has only been really since, it's only just been this year. Yeah. So it'll be interesting when we get back
as you get back into going out more and interesting.
So who knows? Maybe I'll lean more towards vegetarian.
Sure. Yeah.
But it is. I mean, whole foods, plant-based. I love it. I mean, I'll go down and make a huge salad. So I didn't eat anything today. This is my first meal of the day too. So, here's where I also notice it is the inflammation.
Yeah.
So, and with keto, they said, well, it's because of all the carbs. That's not true. Because I don't have the inflammation, and I eat tons of beans and potatoes, and
it's processed foods.
It's processed foods is it, which is why I said, hey, let's try. Look for a clean pizza if you can. Right? You picked up on that.
So do you track what you eat? You're not counting any.
Nothing. I don't track a thing.
You just if it's a whole food, I'm eating it.
And when I make a salad, it's
massive.
Heapy. I mean, it's it's spring greens or the half and half. So the baby kale, baby spinach with the spring mix, and then I'll just whatever I'm in the mood for today. So beets and maybe some brown rice I'll throw on there, chickpeas, and then I'll make a dressing with. I mean, my go-to dressing is tahini, which is just sesame seeds. You know, it's sesame seed butter, basically, with Dijon mustard, a little maple syrup, and a little salt, and a little apple cider vinegar. And I'm telling you what, that is like dressing of the
Is that
gods.
amazing?
Oh.
It's your jam.
See, it's so.
It is so. So my wife hates it.
Yeah,
I mean, it sings to my soul.
that's
Yeah.
great though.
Does she do this with you?
Pretty much. I mean,
Yeah.
she's. And what's interesting is she's the one who really kind of nudged it along. She's close to this, so she's totally vegetarian. She's been vegetarian most of her life. But vegan, whole foods, plant-based is, you know, that's because
big
she's
step.
she's mostly the one almost always making for the kids and those type of things. I mean, I essentially make my own meals now.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to. I mean, just.
But
Yeah.
you know, it's pretty easy when you've got all the raw materials. You just go and pull them all and just throw them in a bowl.
Did you go to the doctor or anything before you started this?
Mm-hmm.
To say, hey, I want tests, I want my numbers,
Mm-hmm.
and then have you been back since to see?
Mm-hmm. So I was high in my cholesterols, all of them. And to the point where, you know, I was going to probably need medication. Totally fine after 4 months. Don't need any meds.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is
Interesting. Interesting how non-processed diet and eating the right foods, healthy foods, changes your body.
Right?
It's ridiculous. It's so funny how, I don't know, like they're just, people are so unhealthy
Yeah.
and they're always trying to find like excuses or reasons why they're feeling, but it's like, dude, stop eating like shit. And trust me, you will feel 10 times better. Cholesterol go down, all these things go down, but it's just, you can't stay away from processed foods and just crap food.
And what I think is, I started to so when keto was really kind of taking hold, which was a couple of years ago, and you know, we were big into it. And then all of a sudden I saw these, and by the way, we never did any of the powders or anything that were keto. We just ate whole foods, but keto style, so a lot of animal protein, frankly. And I just laughed. You know, it just seems like with almost everything, you know, every fad that comes out there, then all of a sudden the Atkins diet or keto, like everything is, and if you think about it, it's all processed. So even with keto or anything else, it's all just processed junk. And it's one of the things that I look at, because I know we're going to get into it today around mental health and emotional well-being. You know, we want a quick fix. We want to, you know, we think we can manufacture everything. And when you really break it down, your emotional well-being, your mental health is a lot simpler than we make it. And yet there's this huge crisis, right? There's this huge crisis around it. And I think it's all connected too. I think the way we eat, I think the way we show up, I think the way we allow ourselves to be in the moment and be present, it all impacts how we experience life.
Well, let's get into it, man. I was curious. So
It's a great transition.
Where are you from? We'll quickly do a little history there, and we don't have to dwell too much on like childhood and whatever, but I just am curious.
You don't want to hear about all that?
Yeah, I would love to. I don't think we wouldn't have enough time. We'd have to, we could do this for hours, but.
Right.
So where are you from originally, and then just how did you get really to Utah?
Yeah, I'm a Southeast Idaho boy. So I grew up,
Where from?
So I was actually born in the Magic Valley, if you've ever heard of Jerome, which is right outside of Twin Falls.
Okay.
But I was
with a J, Jerome?
Jerome.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Little farm community, really. But I was in Pocatello till I was 6 or 7. But I was raised in Rexburg, Idaho, of all places. So where BYU Idaho is now. It used to be called Ricks.
Yep.
Cold. Like you talk to anybody and they'll
It's
the
so
first thing
cold.
they'll tell you is it's so cold
Dude,
there.
it's so cold.
It's like Canada weather. You know, the
Yeah.
wind is brutal. So small town, and you know, I grew up essentially like most people in Idaho and Utah, how you would think they grew up. You know, grew up in religion, grew up just, you know, kind of the all-American kid. Played sports.
And you're 51 now.
I'm 51 now, so I graduated
So I'm
in
trying
87.
to place 87. Okay, I was trying to place kind of the time frame.
Yeah.
Anyway, one of my best friends is from Rexburg. He lives there. He grew up there, moved here, and now he's back. But
How old is he?
you know what? I think he's,
Ooh, Chubbs?
47.
Oh, Aaron Peterson?
Yeah, okay, yeah, Aaron Peters, yeah.
Come on now.
So,
What about the Humphreys? Do you know the Humphreys?
Shout out to Aaron.
Yeah. Anyway,
Do you know the Humphreys from Idaho?
I don't know the Humphreys,
Okay.
but Aaron and my younger brother were very close friends. Randy Garn, I know Randy really well.
Randy
I know
Garn.
all those guys.
all those
They were all a
dudes,
bunch of
those
punk little kids.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Oh, I could only imagine how big as pieces
I
of
totally-
shit those dudes
I
were
totally
growing
have
up.
stories about those guys. So I owned a little arcade.
Yeah.
And they would, and unbeknownst to me, you know, I'm the responsible 22-year-old at the time,
Yeah.
22, 23, and my brother and Aaron, so Chubbs and Randy Garn and all those guys, they stole my keys to the arcade and they'd go play an NBA Jam all night.
Yeah, dude.
That wasn't the only thing they were doing, but that was definitely one of the things they were
That's
doing.
good.
We'll just leave it at that.
Anyway, I was just thinking. Anyway, Aaron and I, different story, different time, but yeah, a good long-time friend of mine. But I just was thinking.
And you fly fish with them, I'll bet.
Yes, that's where the fly.
That's where
a
it
lot
is.
of fly fishing has come from that relationship. I grew up doing that, but one day on a Sunday we were at church. I didn't even know who he was. I hear him mention fly fishing as he kind of walks past me, and you know, of course, I just turn around and like, hold on, who are you? You know, because that's just part of who I am. Ever since then, we've been best buds and been on fishing trips for 20 years now. But I did a recruiting trip to go to Rick's to play basketball. And I went up there with a couple of my buddies. Dude, we drove my parents' van. We got caught in a freaking snowstorm. I'm like, there's no way in hell I'm going to Rick's. I don't even know. There was maybe 3 restaurants, and this is like 95.
Was Gardner still the coach?
He might have been.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, they used to play in that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, maybe that arena's still around, but the seats were down below the
Yeah.
floor level. Do you remember that? Did you ever play there?
I never played at Rick's.
Oh my gosh, it was just it was a cool place to play, but dude, you'd get creamed by the students. It was so intense. It was good. They had good teams back in the day. But anyway, I just remember that was the snowstorm got caught in recruiting.
Yeah,
trip.
it was a
and
cold
that's what I remember,
place.
just cold.
And I remember 2 things that I swore I would never live in a small town. And I was the oldest of 7 kids. I would never have a big family. So I was the oldest of 7, lived in Rexburg. I live in a smaller town in Midway
Yeah.
With more kids.
with more kids. I've got 9.
Yeah.
So be careful, kids, what you ask for, right?
Yeah.
How old's your oldest and youngest?
20, almost 28, and my youngest is 6.
Okay.
So I had 4 kids when I met Alicia, my wife now, that we've
Okay.
been together now for almost 13 years. We had 4 together, and I'm talking back to back to back, all single bursts, but back to back to back to back. They're ages 6 to 11.
How was that?
What were we thinking?
Well, at least you did it right, where it was just like back to back to back to back.
Yeah, and
instead of a couple years in between, a few years in between. That's the worst.
We couldn't have done that though, just because of age. I mean, and even with our last one, there were complications, and it was a tough pregnancy, but yeah, I would just there'd be a twinkle in my eye, and hey, honey, we're pregnant. I mean, it was the perfect storm for us. But yeah, so it was Rexburg. I mean, I didn't do any traveling. I was pretty sheltered growing up in Rexburg, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, this very small Mormon town, right?
Yep.
But I had the entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, I wanted to own businesses when I was younger, and had a bunch of carpet cleaning companies. So I'm going to college at Rick's. It was still called Rick's. And I was working for a carpet cleaning company because he could schedule, my appointments around my my college classes. And then he comes to me one day and he's like, hey, I'm getting ready. I'm going to start franchising. Do you want to buy the original one? And I'm like, I know how much money this guy's making. I know how much I'm making. That makes a lot of sense. So I was able to get a loan with my wife at the time. Her dad was the co-signer. Can't believe he did it. Bought the business. And, you know, I'm 22, 23 years old, and I'm making 80 grand. I'm making more than my college professors, because this was in the early 90s.
Yeah.
So I had the, you know, I caught the bug, and when I bought it, it was doing about 40 grand. We were doing about 80 grand, you know, within a year, because I had just had a marketing knack. But then I had a nervous breakdown. Like, seriously, I felt like I'm 25 and I'm like, I'm gonna die in this small town and I will never have made anything of myself. And, you know, it was kind of one of those moments. And so I was looking for opportunities, wanted to move to the big city, got my chance. I met a group down here in Utah.
What big city?
Salt Lake.
Okay.
The big, I mean,
Okay.
we're talking
Big.
huge city,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I just don't know if you want to go to like Boise or, you know what I mean? Like,
Boy, you're right.
yeah. Okay.
So, you know, I think I'm 26, 25, 26. I end up investing some money in this group down here that had a bunch of startups. But I really wanted, I invested it because I wanted to come down and work for this guy and be down here and, you know, kind of develop myself a little bit. And I got the chance. So I came down here to Salt Lake, moved here to Draper, and wouldn't you know it, I had a knack. I knew how to market things. I knew how to create a lot of buzz around certain products and business ideas, and had some successes. We ended up doing a reverse merger. Do you know what that is with a company? It's where you take a shell public company and you take a company that's not public and you essentially take that public status. It's kind of dicey, honestly, but it happens a lot here in Utah.
It does.
Yeah.
Does it
That
also
wouldn't
happen in
surprise
China?
you. Maybe, I don't know. But it's a way to issue shares and to take a company public, and then anyway,
Yes,
the long
okay.
and short of it was I made a ton of money before I was 30. And on paper I was a millionaire, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you know, I'm gonna keep doing this kind of stuff. But it was about that same time when I was starting to notice I was struggling with my own mental health. And to say that now, I really didn't understand it that way. I'm just like, why do I always feel out of sorts?
Yeah, something's off.
Something's off, something's not right.
So at that time, it wasn't like I'm dealing with mental health. It was just,
Yeah,
And
nobody,
you've
feel
been in
off.
Utah what? I mean, you've been in Utah for years at this point.
at this point, I'd been in 4 or 5 years. I'd made some money. I was making really good money for mid 26, 27-year-old, and it was interesting because we certainly didn't talk about mental health like we do today.
Oh, I can only imagine.
And there's stigma today, so you can imagine back then it was like, no, you just gotta, just gotta be
buck up,
strong,
buddy. Yeah,
right?
just
Buck up, right?
Just
right.
say your prayers.
Oh boy, we can open that one.
No, I'm just. Well,
No,
I'm just
we can't open that because
I'm just saying, like, I can understand. I would have a complete. I mean, I'm just thinking through at that age. I mean, it's just like even nowadays you still have this problem, but it's like, oh no, just pray more, and you'll be fine, or like you have no idea what's going on, but you have pressures from business, you have pressures from family, you got pressures from whatever church you're at, but especially here.
Yeah.
Like you are going to feel guilty in other things, just based off of the culture, the Mormon culture and different things. But, anyway, no, I say that as a joke, but I know that is 100% like, oh, just say your prayers, you'll be fine.
Yeah, well, so I actually had a business partner come to me and tell me, and I had just gotten out of the psych ward, which we'll get to, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And he's like, dude, you just need to say your prayers more. And I'm
That's
like,
hilarious, yeah.
but that's a real thing. I mean,
Sure.
And that would be like someone that breaks their arm, and it's like, you don't need to go to the doctor, just get on your knees and say your prayers.
Yeah.
Here's the challenge that we have, and what I had back then and what we have today is you can't see it. right? It's something that's going on inside of us.
Not tangible.
It's not tangible, and what I found is as I was starting, so I was struggling. I had stomach problems, insomnia that started before I got to Utah, but it was really kind of emerging even more. And it seemed like the more successful I got,
just manifest different
it was
ways.
it was coming up even
yeah.
more. I mean, and I've got a theory about that. I think the more that I accomplished the things that I thought were going to make me happy, I was all of a sudden having this crisis going, oh, you mean the money and the, you know, and the acknowledgement and the notoriety of being this whiz kid that could do these things? If that's not making me happy, now what? And that's when I started to self-medicate. So it started very innocently. In fact, I was going to the gym a lot, and I was introduced to GHB, if you remember that back in the late 90s, early 2000s. It was called the date rape drug back then. It was really...
GHB?
GHB.
GHB.
So it was, I mean, it made its rounds. It's still around, but it was liquid ecstasy is another way that they used to describe it. So I bought it at GNC because they said, oh, this will help you with your sleep and it'll
it was sold at GHC.
It was sold, GHB was sold at GNC. Is that a wrap?
That's great.
I don't know, maybe.
It could be.
And so I took this and I mean, it was the promised land. I'm like, it made me super high, but I'd go to sleep and I'm like, oh my gosh, I found the solution to my insomnia. And I had zero awareness around mental health or what was going on with me. And so I was just trying to fix my feelings like anybody would, right? And if you don't have any idea of really what's going on, and because I was a whiz kid and I was, you know, smart and I'd been able to kind of overcome all this other stuff, well, gosh, this was nothing. And man, when I started to get my hands on more prescription medications and I started to get my hands on alcohol, which I played around with a little bit in high school for about a year, but now it was different. It wasn't a social thing. It was a
self-medicating.
Fix my feeling, fix my anxiety, fix my, you know, my insecurities about myself and all of that. And anyone who tells you that, you know, drugs are a problem, I would have you look at it differently. It's actually a solution. It's not a very sustainable solution, but it's not a problem. When you start to think of it that way, that it's no different than somebody going into the gym, right? And becoming and using that as or using work.
It is a solution to the problems you have at the time.
Right.
Right.
Which is,
if you're saying look at it that way.
Yeah. It's well, think of anxiety. I mean, somebody can. I mean, here in Utah, I think we still lead the nation in medications for depression, anxiety, opioid use. We're in the top 20. It's all about, we just need to fix our feelings. And I think the biggest issue that we have here in Utah, but really in the world, is I think most of us suffer from what I like to call I'm fine-itis. No, I'm
describe
fine.
that. Yeah, describe. I'm fine.
I'm fine. Hey, man, it seems like you're down. No, I'm fine. I'm good. Man,
that's mine. I'm good.
Yeah, right.
I'm good.
Yeah, mine was the I'm fine-itis, and you know, now that I look back, I look at it and go, man, I had such a chameleon complex. Like, I would show up in the moment, from a business meeting to whoever the crowd was that I was around, and I would just kind of blend into whatever I needed to be for the moment, to be accepted, to be liked. And what I didn't realize is in that process, I was losing myself. I mean, I would always tell people I was fine. Don't bother me. I'm good. And all of a sudden, I'm finding myself separating from reality of what was really going on within me, and that's where that self-medication started to come in. And then, as we've all heard these stories, it started to get out of control. Yeah. So I ended up leaving my wife and my two little girls that I had at the time. They eventually moved back to Idaho because I essentially shut them out because of the shame, the guilt, the overwhelm. I really didn't want them to know what I was up to. Mostly because I was so embarrassed and I couldn't get a handle of it. But at this same time, I'm having some of the biggest financial success. In fact, to this day, the biggest financial success I've ever had. I took a bankrupt company with a team. It wasn't just me, but within 18 months, we went from 2 million to 20 million in sales in 18 months.
What company was that?
It was called Mind's Eye Group.
Mind's Eye Group.
Yeah, so we did trade show booths. We did kiosks for malls. T-Mobile was our largest client.
Yeah.
Weeder Nutritionals was another big client. So if you've ever gone, so that's why I was so fascinated when you were showing me all the pods here. Was, you know, I love design and ingenuity and things like that, and so here I am completely falling apart. And by this time, I've got a $10,000 a month OxyContin habit and cocaine habit. And I mean, I'm on the phone with T-Mobile doing these mega multi-million-dollar deals, and I'm so high I don't even remember the conversations.
Okay. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So go back to like whatever point in time before your wife moved back, whatever. Did you ever actually confide in somebody, like a best friend? Or because the thing is, like, people look at you and they're like, okay, dude, there's no way this guy's right. Like, we know he's off, like 100%. Like, or they see you do something. How you doing? I'm fine, right? That's what you say. But don't you feel like the problem is, like, I have 4 kids, and even kids with their parents. I mean, you know they're off, but if you go and ask them, hey, what's going on? It's almost impossible that they actually share what is going on. They're embarrassed or they don't want to tell you, but it seems like the issue is you just don't ever find the person in your life that you can actually tell what is really going on. And then people that just kind of know you or that pass by your neighbors, if they're like, hey, what's up, man? How you doing? Oh, I'm fine. Obviously, you're never going to tell them what's going on because you don't even care about them. They're just, but I don't know. I've had this thought for years. It's like, if my kids weren't telling me, hopefully they're telling their best friends. There's got to be somebody that you would tell what the hell is going on. If you're dealing with it, I don't know. I'm just curious in your experience if you ever had that. Who are you ever going to tell? What's really going on?
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up because there was.
Yeah.
So my uncle, who was my dad's youngest brother, was only 5 years older than me. So he was closer to my age than he was my dad. So he felt more like an older brother, but he was the reason I moved to Utah in the first place. He was like my mentor, my best friend. I looked up to him. So when I was 29, he died in a horrific Ferrari accident. So he was an exotic car guy. He would find exotic cars for all the new skin executives, and Donny Osmond was a good friend of his. And so he was the guy that would find all these cars. He ended up getting in this horrific car accident right here in Draper. And I was called that night. I remember there was an Oscar De La Hoya fight that night, and all of a sudden I get a call from my dad, and he's like, hey, Chris has been in an accident. You need to go down to the hospital. I thought it was, he got banged up.
Broke his leg or something. Yeah.
And when I walk in there, and he was already gone, and it was not a pretty thing. And I went into total shock, and that was the shift. That was the dramatic shift. So it went from a little bit of self-medicating to full-on, what can I do to get out of the reality that I'm experiencing right now, which is where, I started trying anything and everything. I mean, and so I never really tiptoed from that point on. And within 6 months, I mean, I was full-blown overdosing on all kinds of stuff from when he died. I mean, it was a rough time. So I lost that confidant and that mentor and that one person that I felt like I could maybe that I did. I mean, he was the one guy I could go to and just say, man, I could just be myself. Everyone else, I felt like I had to show up as, the perfect kid next door because everybody was counting on me. My company was counting on me. The reason my company never really, did a whole lot is because, remember, we had gone from 2 million to 20 million from bankruptcy to being the 26th fastest growing company in the state of Utah. And who was the front guy? So literally they were crisis management. When it got really bad, they were crisis management. And then once the deal got done, then they all came and we had the intervention, and finally I'm like, okay, enough pressure. I better go to rehab. Yeah. So I did.
What were those, back up for a second, what were those conversations like with your uncle? Like, were you 100% real with him? Like, hey, I'm doing this, taking X and Y to help me feel better.
Yeah.
Was he real with you, or was just like, you can get better?
We actually, so we both talked a lot about it because he felt those same things. And I mean, it was the realest that I would ever get with anyone. I mean, I couldn't say, honestly, I couldn't ever bear the thought of going to my wife at the time and sharing with her anything. I didn't want her to get afraid or scared or upset. And I think that happens a lot where we just don't want to let people down, right? Whether it's our parents, our spouses, our business partners.
And then you're like, the embarrassment is like a massive emotion.
Oh, yeah.
You don't want to let them down, but I don't know. Like, I've experienced that in my life. It's like, dude, you feel like shit. I mean, it is bad. And maybe at different levels for different people, of course, but I've always felt like that's one reason why people just hold on to it, because they're just, it's just this embarrassment level that it's hard to describe.
Yeah, it is, and it makes me think. Just recently, so Tony Hsieh from Zappos. Have you guys heard what happened with him?
No, I saw that on LinkedIn.
So he died just recently, and they said it was complications to a fire, but now everything's coming out. He was struggling with addiction, mental illness. He had this fascination with fire. He was asphyxiating himself. He was trying to fix those feelings. And here's a guy who literally wrote the book on delivering happiness, and yet he couldn't find it for himself. Which, man, as I'm reading his story, I'm like, man, I can relate with him so much on feeling those, that sense of inadequacy, or I'm never going to measure up, and it goes back to my childhood. I mean, I remember as a 6, 7, 8-year-old forgetting to say my prayers in the morning, and by that afternoon the guilt was so heavy.
Why is that? Why do you think?
My experience, because I was told my whole life that God was watching me, and I needed to, if I wanted to be back in heaven again, then I needed to make sure that I prayed to God every single day.
Better check those boxes.
And I know this is a totally different tangent, but I hate, I don't say hate, hate's a strong word, those type of stories, because you look back and you're just like, okay, well, whose fault is that? You can't necessarily, like, our parents are doing the best they can. And it's like other people around us are doing the best they can. It's just like, well, they really believe that, but they never realized how much harm that was doing.
It's systemic. It's no different than a culture of any company that you go into. It's bred into the system.
Yeah.
Right? And yet when you break it down, I mean, I had a serious case of perfectionism. And if you want to talk about here in Utah, and it's, I belong to a group, and every Saturday morning at 6 a.m. and it's people from different walks of life, different religions, different backgrounds, different races. We get on a call every Saturday morning at 6 a.m. Mountain Time, and just have real conversations. It's not just a Utah thing or a Mormon thing. It's a society thing. I think in general, most people are raised that we're supposed to be okay. And if we're not okay, then we're strong enough when we have enough willpower to overcome it. Yeah. Because that's what from a business standpoint, what have we always been told? You can overcome this. You got to grind it out. There's a book, Angela. I want to say Angela. Is it Duckworth? Grit. Have you ever heard?
Yes.
We just got to persevere, and we just and I get that side of it, but I think that can become as much of an addiction as any drug that's out there is. We have this addiction to be okay or to act like we're okay when we're not okay.
Yeah. You know, and as we have gotten older, it's interesting because I felt the same type of feelings growing up. And it's the more that you, well, obviously with age, this just comes naturally, but the more you understand and the more you learn about, if you really want to learn about those things, the more you understand, it does make sense. It becomes easier. And I think with business, sometimes it's like, you can work your ass off. You can work as hard as you can. But if you're an idiot, it doesn't matter. And I say that, I mean, not really the idiot, but you just got to learn. You got to grow. You have to educate yourself, and at least be willing to learn. And I think it just goes along. You mentioned the business. That was just a thought of. It doesn't matter if it's just like when you're little and you're praying, but when you get older, you really have a better understanding of spirituality. Like if you stay that path, just how it works. It's not like you don't get you don't get the same guilt. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
yeah, I still think though that our culture still really feeds off of that perfectionism, and that we're fine.
Yes, and my hope is it's slow. I'm hoping we are slowly. There's more people that are becoming aware.
Yes,
and hopefully that just is growing faster to expand to parents and people to have a better understanding and not making their kids feel like crap, and talking to them differently, teaching them differently, And again, I mean, I'm telling you right now, I mean, I'm a member of the LDS Church. I mean, I love everything that all my experiences and my family and how I'm set up now. But again, little different. I still think completely different than a lot of people when it comes to these things. But again, I don't want to get off on track on these, on at least the Utah type of culture but.
Well, but I think it's important to talk about because I was on a call with someone who works a lot with charter schools, and she was so excited to tell me that all these charter schools, when they're getting tested for happiness and those type of things, how they're off the charts. Like everybody is testing like we're this school is one of the happiest, and I'm like, that's really interesting because it happened to be in Utah County.
Okay.
Do you know where Utah sits when it comes to depression in the United States? We're number 1 in the entire country. Do you know where we are when it comes to suicide?
We're up there, aren't we?
We're between number 5 and number 8, depending on which data you look at and what year you look at. So if that doesn't point to, we have to show up a certain way and say we're a certain way, but we're really not. And by the way, the depression, you know how they determine that? By number of prescription. I mean, it's hard data. It's what insurance companies are reporting, and they're saying Utah is number 1. And I mean, there's almost not a week that goes by where you don't hear of another executive that died by suicide here in Utah. I mean, there's so many entrepreneurs, and the pressure and the culture that we built here. I mean, every time I hear of a Qualtrics selling for $9 billion and a Workfront selling for $1.5 billion, I'm like, I can't even imagine the pressure on all those other tech entrepreneurs that are going, oh no, how am I going to do it?
How do I get here?
Because that's the culture that we're in, right? Is we have got to keep up with the Joneses, because it is such a part of our identity that we're successful, that that we have good grades, that we have the that we all have a Tesla, and we all and none of that stuff is wrong. That's great. But there's this sense, and I think it comes from a lack of understanding of who we really are, which is, by the way, what I struggled with. So yes. Not to let the cat out of the bag, but I'm going to. You know why the reason that I really went and started, why I needed to fix these feelings? Because I did not feel worthy of love. I did not feel like I was measuring up, and that the only reason people liked me, loved me, hung out with me is because I could bring awesome business, I could bring tons of money. Yeah. I was charismatic. I could do this.
Yes.
So it was always a tit for tat. It was a negotiation. It wasn't the essence of James Hadlock is he's a nice guy. He's a lovable dude. It was, can he bring me something? So imagine the pressure every single time I went into a sales room, because there was only one goal in mind: win at all cost. And if you want to see what that can turn into without an addiction, look at the leadership of this country. Win at all cost. And that's a scary proposition when you, and I don't care what side of the political spectrum you're on, it doesn't matter. We're not good on either side, right?
Yeah.
And it's this attitude, and you know, I go back to, it really is, what does that say about me? If I don't have a good sense of self, then I have to get the big business deal. It's why I turned into such a great salesperson, because no was not an option.
Okay, so another question. How many, best friends? Like who, right now, not right now. I'm just trying to think of, when you said this thing, I thought, okay, you just get in exchange, like you just are feeling like you're, people only, I don't know maybe how do I describe this? Did people just love you and are best friends for you because you were just James? Or did you ever feel like, I don't have anybody that, they only like me because my money, I mean, I'm good
I thought
at
the
business.
same thing about my parents. I thought the same thing about
Really?
God. Because
That's crazy.
But here was the setup, though. The setup was, well, what was I taught as a kid? At least in my filter, this is what I heard.
Yeah.
You have to do this, this, and this, and this. You have to go on a mission. You have to get married in the temple, or God will not love you. And it wasn't said that way, but it was said, you're not going to get back to heaven. And so
That's how you.
but that's how I interpreted that.
Yep.
Yes.
That was the filter that I had, is, so my life is about doing, it's not about being.
Yeah. Yes.
And I
'cause
think-
if
and I
you
think
do
most
this, you
of
do
us-
this, you do this, you do this, then the love comes.
And you said that, check the box. Went on a mission, extended the mission as long as I could, because that was another box.
yeah,
If you were,
dude. Oh, yeah.
if you could, you were gonna.
'Cause
You
guess
didn't
what?
extend your. Isn't that funny how you can't just serve a mission? You got to extend
gotta
it if
extend
you
it.
can.
Oh, yeah.
Then you have to be married within a year. Then what's the next one? Got to have kids within a
have
year of
kids.
that.
Yeah, they got it.
So it was. There was this agenda that was set up from way long ago, that if you didn't follow it, you were going to be a failure and you were going to hell. And that went through my filter in an extreme way, because
Yes.
what I haven't shared with you is there was sexual trauma when I was 7 or 8 years old.
Okay.
So there was a couple, really close friends to my mom and dad, and when my mom and her best friend would go to church meetings, the husband would watch us, and there's still some cloudiness there, and I'm not going to get into any of the details. You don't need to know any of that. It's irrelevant. I'm past it 100%. But he was having me do things to neighbor kids and basically being put on display. So this was so couple that with a systemic,
Yes.
sense of perfectionism, and you can't fail, and you got to be perfect, and you got to be, this, that, and the other, and all of a sudden it sets you up to go at an extreme level, right?
Yeah.
When I remember closing the deal, we had Zion's Bank that was getting ready to close our building down because we were in bankruptcy, and they're like, we're shutting you down. And I was up working with T-Mobile to get a deal, and the first deal was going to be a $6 million deal, which was going to just change everything for us. And I remember when they signed the document, and it was intense. And when they signed the document, I remember walking out of that room, and all of a sudden I had this huge flood of oh no wash over me.
Really?
And it was, oh shit, how am I gonna beat that one? Because
So instantly it was just, how am I getting the next one?
That's crazy.
I got it. It's
But do you
done.
see
I
where I'm
won.
s- so
Yeah.
But don't we all do that in a way? We hit a certain thing and we're like, man, if I could only make 10 grand. Oh, man, if I could only make 20 grand. Man, if I could only own a business that does $9 billion.
Yes.
That we continue to set that bar, and it's a moving target every single time. So I don't know all the reasons that Utah leads in all of these areas when it comes to mental health, but I'm finitis certainly has to be a part of it.
Yeah. When did you hit that When did it click for you when you're like, okay, there's something wrong. I checked myself in to a rehab, right? When did you have that moment of clarity that's like, I can take control of my feelings, how I feel, what I'm doing, how I'm acting?
Yeah, so I ended up in treatment twice, one for 30 days and then another time a couple of years later for 100 days. And then I was in and out of the psych ward at uni on 3 different occasions. And so that was all going on. And I remember
Still working at this? I mean, still working, running businesses, or is this kind of in the background now?
So I had the business that I had helped build, I basically disappeared after a couple of years, and then they kept begging me to come back because they were really hurting again, and so I went back, and I was about 6 months out of the psych ward, and I was doing really well, and then a headhunter calls me up and says, "Hey, I've got one of the largest trade show companies in the world that wants to interview you and look at you," and all of a sudden, what do you think that did to my ego?
Like,
oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm back.
Yeah, you're back.
I mean, they wanted me to run this. How about this for ironic? They wanted me to run their Las Vegas division. So they had no idea of my past. They just knew of all the
Did anybody at this
successes.
point, or have you been trying to keep it a secret?
People around me, my business partners obviously did, family members, friends, but outside of the professional world, nobody had a clue. And so I go to meet with this group. I have 17 interviews. Jeez. And I'm sitting in front of the CEO. These guys are doing a couple $2 billion a year. And the CEO looks at me and he goes, "You're the best candidate I think we've ever seen in our entire history. I can't wait to get you into Vegas." So I'm walking on cloud 9 and I'm going home. And then I get on the plane. I'm like, oh, they're totally going to find out about that DUI I had, or they're going to find out about this, so all of a sudden all that guilt and shame, because see, I hadn't resolved any of that. So I write this big long letter to the HR and I let them know, and they actually responded in a very, very, very healthy way. They said, "Hey, we all go through that. Is this still an issue?" I said, "No, it's not an issue. I've been doing great. We want you to go down and meet the team down in Vegas then." And then the executive that was going to be overseeing me, he met me down there, and then we had that talk, the talk of, "Are you really okay? Are things, blah, blah, blah." And I don't think I convinced him, because right before the holidays, in fact, it was about this time 13 years ago, I got the call from my headhunter, and he said, "I don't know what happened," because I didn't tell him what I had done. He goes, "I don't know what happened, but they decided to go a different direction." So what do you think that did?
Oh, it just kicked you right down, man.
Off the rails. Yeah. I went off the rails, and it took me about 3 weeks, but and this is where the mental health, it wasn't just about substance abuse. I mean, I started hiding in closets because I thought people were watching me. I mean, to me, that level of feeling that low and that dejected and rejected, I got paranoid, and I was drinking. And then one night I call up an old buddy that I hadn't talked to in a year and ended up meeting him to get some GHB. And then the next thing I knew, I'm in Springville on my chest with like 30 cops with guns to my head. And I don't remember any of it. Okay. Any of it. Yeah, you want to get real now? Let's go. And I don't remember any of it. And I'll tell you, I mean, fortunately, I've been able to work through all of that, and I didn't harm anyone. I don't know how, because I literally have no recollection. And I was in Murray, so I went from Murray to Springville when they finally stopped me. And I remember when I was in court hearing everything that I did, and I'm like, that doesn't even sound like me. Like, I mean, I guess I was flipping off cops, and I was like Thelma and Louise, and they ended up putting me in jail. For whatever reason, a friend bailed me out. But I saw the writing on the wall. I mean, I had a couple of DUIs. I'm like, I'm totally going to prison. And but I played the whole I'm fine, and this was a mental breakdown. And they didn't officially charge me at the time because they had to unpack everything that had gone on during that time. But because of my history of mental health, it was a complicated case. At least that's the way the prosecutor saw it. And my first thought was I'm totally going to beat this. But the more I thought about it and the more I got into it, I end up in a hotel in Midvale, and I'm completely 100% have a plan to take my life. Because I'm like, I am not going to disappoint anyone else ever again, and I can't stand, the thought, how did I get here? And I'm sitting in this hotel room for about a week, and I'm running out of cash, and I've got my plan, and then of all things, the TV is on, and Glenn Beck, who I never listened to ever, is interviewing Michael Bublé. Do you know who that is? Yeah. The singer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Glenn Beck is asking Michael, he's like, hey, a lot of people don't know about your history, and I'm just catching pieces here, and I'm completely out of my head. I'm as desperate as I've ever been in my life. I'm ready to end my life. And Glenn Beck tells a little bit of the story of Michael Bublé. So did you know he was a wedding singer?
Mm-hmm.
So he was totally a wedding singer, and Glenn Beck's like, you have all this success now, Michael, but people don't know, all the struggles you went through, and that you were on the road, and your grandpa would take you to all these shows, for you to, anyway. So he tells this story about getting that big break, which is, I believe he ended up being the wedding singer at, the prime minister, the chancellor, or somebody for their daughter, something. It was just one of those serendipitous things, and that just launched his career. But he said, why did you not give up after all those years of just kind of going from bar to bar and being a wedding singer? And he said two things. He goes, I just always felt like I was supposed to be a singer. I just felt like I had purpose. And the second thing, and this is what just clinched it for me, is when he said, my grandpa and my parents never gave up on me. And I made the call to my mom. I'm 38 years old, and I call my mom up in Idaho, and they had no idea where I was at. They didn't know if I was dead or whatever. And I go, Mom, is there any way I can come home? She jumped in the car, and she came and grabbed me. And to be clear, my mom was never an enabler. In fact, one time, she testified against me on a probation violation. So yes. I want to be clear out there.
Yes.
This wasn't just her always running to my rescue.
Right.
And funny enough, so I get to my folks' home in Rexburg, on this little farm. And for 2 weeks, I'm still sneaking booze. So that's how strong, even though I feel like I've got to make this change. And then I started to ask, and here was the moment of clarity. And I love how you asked that, because what happened is, over a period in that 2 weeks, I started to ask questions. The first question I asked is, how did I go from superstar, likable, fun, successful, active in my church? How did I go from that to stealing from people, any drugs I could get my hands on? I did some despicable things that we could spend weeks talking about, which we're not going to do. And my first aha moment was, that was the same guy, and I was just using business and charisma to try to fix those same feelings. So I was trying to use all of that to get an acceptance from you, or an okay or a yes from you. And when that didn't work, or when I hit at that point, was a pinnacle for me of, gosh, I got all this money and all these friends, everybody loves me, and I still wasn't happy. That's when that crisis came. And so what I came to understand right then was, my circumstances are not driving my experience of life at all. My second question, and this is where the real change happened, was, so here I am, I have nothing. It's possible I might be going to prison. I've got nothing. And for all this time, I came to understand that I was trying to make up for something in my life, and I was trying to get people to like me for all the stuff I could do. And for whatever reason, I saw the love of my parents for the first time as genuinely love for me and not for what I could do, for the very first time in my life. And it was because there was nothing to love at this point. I was as broken and as downtrodden. And in that moment, I literally had this insight that who are they loving right now if I don't have any of this stuff? And the insight was, well, there's only one explanation to that.
It's just you.
It was just me.
Just
James.
Me. It's not the business guy. It's not, none of that stuff.
None of it. Not the great missionary,
No.
the successful this or whatever. And I'm going to tell you, and this goes against a lot of what's taught out there about addiction. 13 years ago, I knew in that moment, it was like turning on a light switch. I knew I would never use again. Knew. Like there was a deep knowingness inside of me that I knew. Mm-hmm. And you just don't hear that. What you hear is, I got to wake up every day and it's a struggle every day and it can always creep back. Guys, I'm telling you, it's not true.
Yeah.
It's at least that's my experience. And the science can actually even describe that, which we probably don't have time to get into. So I knew that, and then the second one, and I've got to give props to Michael Bublé, and that is I felt like I had purpose. Like I felt like everything I had gone through was now going to be something that was a gift to other people, which is why, it was literally, I didn't know what I was going to do.
Yeah.
I just knew that I was going to be a part of a new solution to mental health, addiction, to people feeling shitty, to people feeling like they don't matter, that there's no hope. And I'm telling you, man, yesterday I was on a call with the local tech company Divvy. Do you know Divvy?
Yeah.
And it's called Divvy Discussions, and this is how I was showing up. And I was telling part of my story, and they said they were having more comments than they've ever seen in any of their discussions. People are starving for realness, for authenticity, for openness, for a space to just be themselves. People are starving, and people are dying here in Utah because they don't feel like they matter and like they're ever going to measure up to the expectation. And we can all say we don't put an expectation on, but if you really dig in, it's systemic here. There is an expectation that's just born into our society as a whole, but also here in Utah that we have to live up to a certain level.
Amen, brother. That hits me hard because you use the word starving. That makes 100% sense to me. People, they are just dying for opportunities just to talk to somebody that maybe is just going to listen, or they just want to, make fun of something like prayer, and not get looked on weird and man, that was interesting when you said that. People are just starving for this discussion and these opportunities, and someone like you, it's just.
Well, it's so funny. So I've got to show you. So a lot of people think I got these tattoos while I was struggling with addiction. I actually got them 2 years ago, and this tattoo right here, that's the tree of life, and this is the symbol of vulnerability, and so it's my life rooted in vulnerability. You didn't see this kind of expression from me growing up. There was nothing authentic about, even though I thought I was really just trying to win you over. So if it was that, it wasn't genuine. It was all a role that I played to try to get to whatever it was that could fill that emptiness that I had inside of me. And today, man, I'll tell you what, that vulnerability, so I don't even think about it. Just, it comes out when it wants to come out. I don't edit it. I let it just find its way. But the kind of responses that I get from people, people want that. And I want to go back to something you said earlier about, how do we help our kids? How do we help the people around us? And you already said the answer. It's we ourselves. We have to take a step back and listen, not just for an hour, and not to just put it in the calendar either, but to make ourselves available and give ourselves to the people in our life. And what starts to happen is all of a sudden they will start to trust you, and then they know they can come to you and go, Dad, that the praying thing is just really weird for me, and that's a real conversation that I promise you there are kids out there that are thinking,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Most.
But here's what's so great about giving yourself an opportunity to really have these kind of conversations. When you start to connect, there's going to be just this natural flow where they come to you. I mean, I have 9 kids through almost 3 decades of kids, all in different levels of their life, and I go to the 2 daughters that I had before I met Alicia, and then we brought together the 5 that we brought to the party, and then the 4 that we've had together. But my 2 daughters, they saw me overdose on Christmas morning and carted off to the hospital. They saw me get in violent screaming matches with their mom because I was out of my head. So there was more than just a cultural thing. There was some true repair and some healing that got to happen. And I think oftentimes people think that, well, I'm all better now, I'm going to go save the world. It's one of the worst things you can do because people aren't ready for it until they are. And when they're ready for it, then they're going to come to you if they trust you and if they know that you're not going to judge them. I mean, here's the thing. Judgment is a connection killer. And we do it all the time. We do it all the time. We don't mean to most of the time, but if you think about all the things that we do, we judge you by what car you have, what neighborhood you're in, all those things. And what it does is it creates these layers and these walls between us where I can't just immerse myself in an experience with you. And with our 9 kids, to my recollection, we haven't had to instigate any conversations around sex, around drugs, around alcohol. You know why? Because they come to us. We have a daughter who shared with us that she is bisexual. It wasn't us going to her, she came to us. And
how amazing is that?
And there was no energy other than the energy that we have in our house, which is most of the time, we're not perfect, I want to be clear here, but it was of respect, of understanding, of thank you so much for sharing what you're feeling and expressing because that's you. And who am I to say any different?
How do you bring that out of people?
Well, it starts with listening.
Right. I mean, when we're talking about your judgment of houses and cars and like, how are you bringing that out of people to say, hey, you know what, where you're at is fine?
Well, I think, the problem here is one of the problems. You're going to have parents that have no freaking clue. There's no way in hell their kid will ever come to them and say, I'm bisexual. Ever. Ever. And it's weird because it's not like the parents hate their kids. It's not like it's just a total disconnect with how they have, again, I hate to say this, but they either raised their kids or taught their kids. I mean, they're teaching them like, we love you. I mean, I love my kid. I mean, maybe even unconditionally, they teach them that. But then there's no way in hell their kid's going to tell them that. But because of something, what is that? Is that just, who in the hell knows? I mean, who knows really what that is? But that's the problem. And then that child is never going to be able to tell their parents because they're going to think their parents are going to hate them, or they're going to disown them, or they're not going to trust me anymore, or I'm letting them down, and then that's the start of just crappy things. But it's just anyway. I sorry to hijack that little.
No, and let me ask it in a different way. I mean, so you have this incredible story, and thank you, by the way, for being vulnerable and sharing. You have this incredible story. You've taken all these experiences, rolled them up. You have Blue Novus now. What is Blue Novus doing, right, for your divvies and these employers? Like, how are you helping these employees, to the question I just asked, to say, I do have a wall, I have these judgments, I see my neighbors and their cars and what they're doing, and I want it, and I want this and that. Like, what is Blue Novus? What are you doing to hopefully bring those walls down, those barriers down?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I think what's relevant is to educate, first of all, and to help organizations understand that just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. And again, the numbers are, do you know that 8 out of 10 people that struggle with mental illness worldwide will never reach out and get help?
I believe that.
So that's not Utah. Yeah. Utah, I think, is probably 9.5 out of 10, honestly.
Yeah.
So it starts with some education, then it moves into normalizing the conversation. So when you start to get leaders, so Purple Mattress is one of our clients, and they have taken this initiative and they've run with it as well as anyone that we've ever worked with. I mean, their managers are creating the kind of relationships with their employees that most of the people that reach into our call center, so we have an outlet where people can just call and just talk. So basically what we created that outlet for trust, where you can talk to somebody who's well-trained, and it's not just about getting a therapist, it's, you know what, I just got in a fight with one of my kids and I feel awful about it and I feel guilty. I just need someone to talk to. So we're that outlet for people. But Purple, most of the people that use the service is because that employee went to a manager because they trusted them, because some of the training that we do with them, and that manager said, what? You know what? You ought to call the call center. You ought to reach into the care center with Blue Novus. And so we see it in a couple of different ways: awareness, education, and then culture. So to us, mental health in the workplace has always been addressed downstream. It's been addressed when it hits crisis.
Yeah, it's always been a taboo, right? It's like you just don't.
Right? It's always been like, hey, you know what? James hasn't shown up to work in a week. We don't know where he's at. We probably ought to do something like that. What we help companies do is flip that and say, it's already there. In fact, 1 out of 4 people are struggling with their mental health right now today. It was 1 out of 5. COVID has helped accelerate that. So 1/4 of your staff right now is struggling with their mental health in various ways. So what if you could create the kind of environment, and we call it psychological safety if we want to get really official here, but what if you could create psychological safety in the workplace through listening, through building rapport, through normalizing the conversation and looking at mental health the same way you would look at, I busted my wrist bike riding last week, or I busted a rib. It's so funny. If I was on my bike and on a trip and I busted up my ribs, when I'm calling up all my friends or even the people I'm working with, you may not even be able to see it, but what am I probably talking about? Man, last week, right? It's almost a badge of honor. But if I just got let out of uni for psychiatric, because I had a meltdown and a psychotic break.
Not even close.
So let me tell you the vision of Blue Novus, which is so far out there, but I see a day when people can talk about their mental health the same way they talk about a broken bone. When we do that, and I believe it's possible, and I don't think it's that far out, if people will just embrace the idea of it's no different than any other ailment. Hey, I'm calling in sick because I've got the flu. So to me, it's about creating psychological safety, and you do that through building rapport. And what's interesting is, if you look at the data around employee engagement, it's actually gone backwards over the last 20 years. Even though we've had all the data in the world,
Really?
It's gone backwards. And I have a theory. I believe it's because we're not addressing it on a mental health level. So, I was a huge fan of Stephen Covey and First Things First and 7 Habits. But here was the problem with all of that. None of that took into account if I'm having anxiety. And by the way, it's out the door if you are.
Because it doesn't work.
How can I if I'm overwhelmed with anxiety?
And then what's wrong with me? How come 7 Habits of Highly Effective People don't work? How
So
come that
that's
doesn't
the
work?
other
That's what I'm saying.
problem,
Well,
is
then what's
because
wrong?
so everything is built on performance, and again, we've got it backwards. Here is a very logical question. If I feel happy, and if I feel settled, and if I feel secure within myself, what are the odds that I'm going to be a better performer at work?
They're high.
Very high.
So can I get real for just 1 second? Why in the hell do leaders not think about that and why aren't they investing as much in mental health as they are everything else that they're doing in their company? Like, come on. To me, it's crystal clear, but we've got to help these leaders really have that same aha moment that I had 13 years ago.
Right.
Right?
Man, dude.
So outside of a call center, what are you doing?
We do trainings. So we have an online wellness library. So we have a library, we like to call it the Netflix of emotional well-being. So if you're an employee at Purple and you're experiencing anxiety, you don't even have to call the call center. You can actually tap into the Netflix of well-being, and you can watch from one of the top experts in anxiety in the country, and she breaks down and shares with you some of the things you can do. We have mindfulness. So if I were to encapsulate it, what we are and what we are becoming at Blue Novus is a combination of apps like Headspace and Calm, but also Tony Robbins and Stephen Covey, and then your traditional EAP. We're really all three of those in one little package, because if you don't address it on a cultural level, we're always going to just be reacting.
What is your measure of success?
Yeah, we have quite
right. So what does Purple look at? What are you looking at? You've been in there for a year.
Quantify the
how do you quantify
results.
that to say, okay, Blue Nova, you guys are amazing. You're doing great because of this.
Yeah, so there are some we're tracking now, and there's more that we'll be tracking as we get more data. I mean, a really easy one, if you were to compare us to any EAP in the country, a typical EAP gets about a 3% engagement, which means if you have 100 employees, 3 of them will reach into that call center.
EAPs are always an afterthought. It's always...
Right.
And I think people use it when they get to like the tail end. It's like, I am at my break.
Yeah.
What are my options? Oh, I remember...
the proactive engagement.
I remember an open
reactive.
So our
enrollment.
proactive engagement is we're 30 to 60% engagement with our clients. We have one client that's a little bit of an outlier that's over 80% engagement. So those are some of the front end analytics, right? But as we go further into this, we ask companies to start tracking absenteeism. We ask them to start tracking performance in general once their managers are trained. Because here's the thing: you've got to start looking at this. I mean, you can look at emergency room visits, you can look at prescriptions, but here's the thing: you've got to add that training component. If you don't add the training component, then even though we're getting more engagement, it's still, I would argue, it's still a little bit downstream, right? But when you start to train and you start to help people understand how to create the kind of environment where people can have more open conversations like this. Could you imagine having this kind of a conversation within an organization? So that's what I did with Divvy yesterday. And I get a text immediately after, and the executive to the CEO said, 2 people already came in and asked for support because of just what you shared. So don't underestimate the power of vulnerable conversations. So if you're listening to this out there and you're like, we don't have a budget to hire Blue Novus, and we don't have the time, or whatever the case, whatever story you've got in your head about it, I know one thing you can do. You can start to have vulnerable, open conversations around mental health. That alone is going to start to change the narrative.
Yeah. Well, I remember we had Johnny Hanna in here, and he told us his story of just one day. He was like, I'm sick of having to pretend to be somebody else. And he said he went into a one of their weekly meetings, and he just completely was 100% vulnerable, opened up, broke down. And at that point, like his employees like applauded him and like, thank you for doing this. Like I needed this. And I think from that point on, I think it's just opened up.
People are starving for permission to open up and be themselves. Just, I mean, it's that deep, that exhalation, right?
Isn't that interesting too? Again, I love the way you choose words. Starving, they don't need permission, but they think they need permission. They don't, and which it sucks. It sucks.
But our culture's kind of set it up that way in a lot of ways, right?
It's like, dude, you don't need permission. You don't need to be told, hey, it's okay now.
Which is why it takes the Johnny Hannas and the James Hadlocks and guys like you to start to bring this out, because hopefully somebody hears this and then all of a sudden they're like, you know what? I've had enough too. I'm going to step up and I'm going to start to be that voice. Because I'm telling you, there isn't this undercurrent of some tremendous momentum. And people wanting, like, you know, millennials are more likely to get help versus, you know, the older generations. And that's part of the culture as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like they've kind of had it and they're asking why about everything. Thank goodness, because look at where we're at. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's interesting what's going on right now, that we still have a ways to go. But the good news is that it's getting enough attention that at least it's on people's agenda to explore, right? Yeah. And if I were to bring it home to, you know, to a more intimate level as a parent, it's going to sound cliche, but allow yourself to just be present. My wife says this all the time. She's like, be where your feet are. Don't be thinking about the meeting tomorrow. Don't be thinking about what happened at work today. Like, even if you don't have that much time, if you've got all kinds of stuff going on, in those snippets that you do have with your kids, like when you give them a hug, like embrace and just bring it all in, like be in it with them, because it's going to feel different than the old pat on the back hug or the old bro hug that, you know, that we used to do, right? Yeah. Like, be in it, immerse in that moment. And even if those moments are just little, it's going to be felt, it's going to land differently. And that is how you start to build that rapport. Is just, I think we also try to look at gurus and go, well, I need to do it like Stephen Covey did. No, you don't. That worked for Stephen Covey. That did not work for James Hadlock. Yeah. And what worked for James Hadlock will not work for you. But what will work for you, though, is you being willing to allow for that deeper wisdom that's inside you to emerge in the moment. When I work with parents who've got kids that might be struggling, and they ask, so what's the secret? Well, here it is. If you're ready for it, be present, listen, let go of expectation. Your kids totally know you have an expectation on them, and you are bullshitting yourself if you think you don't.
Yeah.
If they're not talking to you, it's because they feel an expectation from you, whether it's inferred or taught or whatever. So we've got to get past that. And the way you do that is literally you've got to let go, so you can have those conversations where a daughter will share something that could be judged in a pretty heavy way with most families, especially here in Utah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, brother, we're over time, dude.
I
don't know if we got time for that. I don't know if it's even appropriate.
Probably not.
We always finish podcasts with some lighter, would you rather questions.
Bring it.
Okay.
Well,
I know you got the Comcast thing.
But you know what?
Okay.
We've got a few more minutes. We're going to be fine.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
I'm going to say, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
We could spend another 3 hours. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of questions
that I digest what you're saying. You don't. I got so many other questions. Yeah. I can't ask them because we would just keep going. But
can we do a part
after
2?
After a podcast,
we can totally do a part 2. I'd love it.
Okay, we're gonna.
You guys are great. I love the format. I love.
Because I was going to say something that would definitely be taken as like totally sacrilegious. And maybe this sets us up for next week. You know, it's funny. As you're pulling this question up, I thought, okay, God could be classified as this guru, our Father in heaven, whatever you want to call him, Christ, whoever you follow. You mentioned this gurus, Like people look at gurus, I got to do it exactly like that. You know, I got to do it exactly like they're telling me to. And then you said, no, you don't. Like it worked for him, that worked for him, that worked for him. And I think that just going back to one of our main questions in the beginning was, how interesting would a conversation be, or a parent teaching, like, you know, keeping the same, you know, principles and the same end goal in mind with whatever structure they're in, you know, whatever, maybe church, right? But tell them, like, dude, there's not one way to get there. You think that there's one way. There's 7 steps you got to do. Like we talked about this, you know, and you put this, you know, even, you know, deity in this. Okay, he's a guru. This is an amazing, you know, figure and a guru. But no, it's not 7 exact steps to get exactly where he wants you to go or where you want to go. And I thought, you know, putting it, I know that's a little light, but you know, for some people they don't like maybe hearing that would be a way to classify, you know, God or whatever. But he's just another guru. And I say that, you know, again, not in a offending way, but it's just, every kid can get there in their own way, and hopefully you're aware enough to understand and help them get there. Anyway, and we got a little more deeper.
I will just say this. If you're putting the word but behind any declaration, I love you, but, you've got an expectation. Mm-hmm. And if we want to use Christ and I mean, what was the one message? It was one message. Love one another. There was no but. There was no if you're gay.
Yes.
Or, so, I mean, I'm just going to throw it out there. If there's a but, it's an expectation, and it will never, ever, ever work. Ever.
Ever.
Ever. End of story.
Amen. Sorry to bring us back. Okay,
No,
let's go. Let's get into the...
Okay.
Yeah, bring it.
We have one that we ask every time.
Yes. Okay. Would you rather have Barry Bonds, home run king, take his bat and swing it as hard as he could right to the middle of your back? Or Tiger Woods takes his golf club and swings right at your shin? Driver to the shin, or Barry Bonds to the back?
Oh, that's a
Now,
good
the good thing
one.
about the fun part of this game is you have to pick one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
That's
gotta
the
pick
one
one.
rule is you got to pick
You
one.
have to pick one.
So I'm a Dodger fan, like through and through. So and because Barry Bonds was with the Giants,
Yes.
I cannot give him the satisfaction of putting a Dodger fan. So I'm going to have to go with Tiger Woods. As
Tiger
much
Woods.
as
Probably the smart choice.
Right.
We're
But that's
talking
a good
shins
one.
versus backs.
Oh, and that I can feel that too on my
Yeah.
shin. That's a great
Worst case scenario, you die from Barry Bonds. Worst case, you get a new leg.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh.
Can you pick just a favorite food?
Not your salad. Pick something else.
Pizza with the kids, man.
Pizza.
I'm
Okay.
telling you.
What's your least favorite? Do you
Least
have
favorite
one thing
food?
that you don't like olives or something? At this point, it might be meat.
It could
Yeah.
be meat. It could be meat, but
Like for me, it's cucumbers. I can't
man,
eat a
I mean,
cucumber.
I'm trying to think of a veggie or a fruit that I don't like, and man, I like it all.
Well, this isn't
So
gonna
we're gonna
work.
have to. We'll go with
This will
animal
be tough.
protein.
All right. Would you rather be allergic to your favorite food, okay, to pizza, or be forced to eat your least favorite food once a week?
Oh, I'd
So
rather
your
be
least-
forced to eat my least favorite because it's not that hard.
Yeah, you don't really have a
That's
least
not-
favorite, so it's not.
that's
that one
not-
doesn't
Yeah, I
matter.
just
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Would you rather have no thumbs or no fingers?
Shoot. No finger. I think
Ooh, that's a tough one.
we're all looking at our thumbs.
I know. I'm
Hold on,
thinking.
because that's the only way to know. It's like, okay, well, hold on. I mean, I can't grab this can.
Yeah, I could. Yeah,
Two-hand it.
I could have
yeah,
to
you could
two-hand
two.
it.
I think
With
you're gonna have
thumbs,
to
I
two-hand.
still can't grab
but
it with just
I could
thumbs.
still type with.
Yes.
I could type. So I'm gonna go with no
You might
thumbs.
be able to do like
No thumbs.
No thumbs.
You just figure it out. I think
Okay.
there's less things
That's a good
that
one.
are a
Yeah.
struggle.
Would you rather always have extremely bad gas or always have a really dry mouth? That just it doesn't matter how much you drink, it's just
Ooh, yeah, the mouth.
Dry mouth.
No dry mouth.
no dry mouth.
just farting all the time.
Yeah,
yeah.
Would you rather have?
People, can they smell it? I mean, is it really? Is it
Yeah,
just you have gas all the time?
It's
or
potent.
does it
Yeah,
stink
I think it's going to smell too.
Okay, crap. Oh,
Yeah.
it's those hardcore protein farts.
Yeah,
That's right.
keto farts.
Yeah, right.
Would you?
It's a real thing.
It
It's
is
a real thing.
yeah. Would you rather have a big booger hanging from your nose for the rest of your life, or a giant pimple on your forehead for the rest of your life?
Like, where is it on the forehead? Right in the middle.
Right in the middle.
Right there.
Like big pimple.
I'd say
Or a big
I'd
booger.
say the pimple.
Yeah,
Pimple. Okay.
pimple.
Okay.
The
That's
pimple's
less.
probably
That's
more.
less intrusive. That's kind of
Right.
a less like booger in the nose, dude. That's worse than a pimple most of the time. People are just they're so uncomfortable with that.
Yeah.
What do they say?
Yeah.
Is it white?
And people are going to be like they're not going to tell you
No.
they're not going to tell you to fix the pimple, but they're going to be going, dude, you got a
Yeah,
big old
dude.
cliffhanger
It's like,
going.
sorry, dude, can't even.
I don't know. It might be like. Do you ever see Austin Powers, the guy that has the mole? He's like a mole, mole, mole. Yeah, it might be like that. Okay. Would you rather poop in the only toilet at a party, knowing that you're going to clog it, or poop in the bushes in the backyard?
Ooh.
That's easy. You're pooping outdoors, dude. You're from Rexburg.
Yeah,
Come on, dude.
I
Let's
was
go.
gonna say, I'd poop it outside.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Okay.
You poop outside all the time. I poop outside all the time if it wasn't frowned upon with neighbors. If I had like a little secluded place, I'd go poop outside all the time.
I used to when I'd move pipe back in the potato
dude,
fields.
moving pipe, dude.
Back
Just
in
like
the
your
day.
dog, dude. Your dog just like hunched over, just not
dude,
wanting
you
to
can
make eye
bond-
contact
still
with you.
bond-
Like,
staring at me with
Dude,
that
you
guilty
could
look
poo-
on their face.
Dude, bonding with your dog. Dude, how amazing would that be? Pooing with your dog outside.
would you rather have to wear a stranger's dirty underwear or use their toothbrush?
I'd probably go with the underwear, man. The toothbrush, I just don't know where that thing is again.
Yeah, underwear's a good one.
I'd
probably pick underwear.
Can I turn them inside out?
You can do whatever you want.
Okay,
Yeah. They're
yeah,
just
I
dirty.
gotta
Put them on. It's skin to material.
Yeah.
It's just
Who knows? I mean, he could have gone to the gym that day. Hot
just never
sauna,
know.
hot
Yeah.
yoga. Who
Ooh.
knows? Who knows?
Oof.
Would you rather go through your whole life with one nostril or one ear?
One nostril. I want both my ears.
One nostril. Okay.
Very well said.
Would you rather have to sniff a dog's butt a new dog every time you meet? Okay, you just get down, just do what they do. Sniff
Every
their
time
butt.
you meet a dog.
Yep. Or
Okay.
you have to eat a bowl of dog food for one meal a day for the rest of your life.
No.
No way in
I'd
hell.
smell their butt. I can do
Every
that.
dog you see is just you get down.
Yeah. I guess. I can't.
Yeah,
no.
dude. Why not? Yeah,
I'm not
of course,
gonna. I'm not
dude.
gonna. I'm not gonna eat the dog food.
No way.
No way.
They have that nice in a can. It's like
No
the,
way.
the
Ooh,
real
that,
meat,
ooh,
you
that
know?
wet. Ooh.
Actually, I think sniffing dogs' butts actually might turn into a kind of an interesting thing.
It might-
You might parlay that into like a moneymaker somehow, or I don't know, maybe like famous dog butt sniffer.
Yeah, you'd be like the.
But then you-
like the who's the dog whisperer? You'd be like the
Yes,
opposite
dude.
of
the
that
dog
guy.
sniffer. TikTok, you go viral on TikTok.
TikTok,
for
dude, that's what I'm saying.
Sniffing dogs'
What's
butts.
Rate them.
That's right. Yes.
Like a wine sniffer, a sniffer,
Yes,
or
dude,
whatever.
You're
You'd
the
be-
sommelier of dog butts, dude. I'm a freaking that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Whatever that is.
Would you rather? Oh, sorry. Would you rather have to wear wet socks every day, or have a popcorn kernel stuck in your tooth?
Ooh, that's a good
Rest of your
one.
life.
Hold on. Wear wet socks.
No,
every day.
I, you know what? If I walk in and I get even a drop of water on my sock, I have to change my socks.
Take it off.
Yeah, both of them.
Which tooth?
It doesn't matter.
The one right up here.
Okay,
so
well,
you're
maybe
always-
you're not going to
I
see
mean,
it, but maybe it's just it's always.
I'd
You're not gonna
probably
see
do.
it.
I'd probably be, because there's been where you get something in there and it takes a day to get it
Yeah.
out, and you try everything.
I know, and then you're. Yeah.
I couldn't do the wet
That's
socks
all the time,
I
though.
couldn't do the wet socks. Yeah.
You're going to be in your meetings.
The funny thing is you would eventually get used to that. You would.
You hope.
You'd be like, oh, yeah,
You
it's
probably
just a
get
thing.
used to the wet socks too.
Yeah, but see, that would, I think then you would have foot problems, and then like people wouldn't want to be around you because you take your socks off
Ew, they
places.
just- yeah.
Yeah.
Would you rather drink 2 liters of urine or 2 liters of sweat?
Ooh, I'd go with the urine. The urine is way more
Urine.
sanitary than sweat.
Your sweat, your own sweat?
No. I'm going to say somebody else's for
Oh.
both.
Somebody else's urine or someone else's.
Does that change it?
So okay, pick the guy at the gym that's
All
the
I
stinkiest.
can think about is Jackass when the guy put the sweatsuit on.
Oh my gosh, that made me gag.
I was gagging. So
That makes me gag.
I'd have to do the urine too. That's
Makes
a
me
hard
gag
one,
every
man.
time that I see that, and I
shoot.
just. But you're
Okay,
laughing
you know
and
what that
gagging.
brings me to is the human waterfall. You know, we had a would you rather. Basically, you had to pick two people that you know, if we knew you better, we would say, you're two friends of yours or something, right? That are both maybe a little dirty. You would say, human waterfall is when you take a cup of water, you pour it over their head, but then you catch it in their crotch.
Oh boy.
That's the human waterfall. So you would say, like, are you going to drink Danny's human waterfall or Brent's human waterfall?
Oh boy.
I'm just saying, I don't know what, you talked about the sweat of somebody, I'm just saying.
Eesh.
Yeah.
But it's only one cup.
Would you rather eat chocolate flavored poop or poop flavored chocolate?
Poop flavored chocolate. I could get
Poop?
past that.
Yeah.
I could
You
get past
can't
that.
you can't just get past the fact that it is poop.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it smells or tastes like.
Yeah,
Dude,
I
it's
couldn't do
poop.
it.
Tastes like chocolate. Though.
It does taste like chocolate, dude.
I mean, maybe you could get yourself into that, into that
I
Zen
think you have to
mode.
qualify the question with what animal is it from you? Is it yours, or is it like
No.
like a cow or
No,
a
I
dog?
mean-
Because you might say like someone might
I
eat-
guess dog. Like, I
someone might
wouldn't
eat
say-
If
cow
it was
poop.
dog, though, the hair would give it away, and I would all of a sudden go, "Oh, that's not chocolate."
That's, but you know it's going to taste like it, though, right? You're not going to get sick from it. It's just going to be flavored, just like
Dude,
chocolate. But
right,
instead,
yeah.
you have to think of like that dog that just took a
I
duke
don't
on
know,
your front
that's a
lawn.
good- that's actually
But it's
a
the-
much
but
better
it's the
question now
fear-
that I think about it.
It's the fear like you could get sick from.
Yeah, the more I
think
think
I would
about it, it's a
avoid that.
pretty good one.
That is a good.
Okay.
That's tough. That's tough.
Okay. Would you rather wake up in the morning to find that everyone you work with, how many employees do you guys have?
23.
23. All 23 employees are naked. Or you wake up in front of your whole work family and you're naked.
Me naked for sure.
You're naked.
You wouldn't want to see 23 people. Not
No.
that in your brain.
No.
They don't. Yeah. No. That's
Okay. Last one.
That was a quick, easy. That was an easy one.
A quick, easy one. Okay. Would you rather find out from you're viewing it, you find out that your significant other or your parents were in an adult video?
You want either one. Your parents were in adult video, or your
significant
spouse was
other.
in an adult.
Gosh.
So you're viewing the video and it's like, shit, that's mom and dad, or that's my wife.
Mom and dad.
Totally mom,
Mom
and
and
dad.
dad.
Yeah, no. I mean,
Because then it'd be like, okay, yeah, that's
Yeah, but you're never I mean, I see both sides. But
This
I'm
is
just
before
like,
you're married.
you don't.
This is before
Yeah,
you're married.
before you're married. But you're not getting that out of your head. You're gonna see mom and dad at Christmas parties, and you're like, I know what you did.
Yeah, depending on who you are, though, you might like, good job, Dad. Like that was that was sweet, dude.
Maybe. Awesome. Okay, that's it. Thanks, man.
Thanks,
Right
man.
on.
Appreciate you
Thanks.
being here.
Appreciate it.
That was
That was
great.
amazing.
Thanks,
And
guys.
cut. You gotta get out of here.
I do.
Yeah.